welcome everyone to a brand new playlist. This is otakusandgeeks.com Pinfall Rewind, and this is strictly for my wrestling fans and my wrestling gamers out there. And we are going to be visiting wrestling games of the past. We're going to be playing them, we're going to be talking about them. And today, what I wanted to do with this particular episode, episode one, I wanted to look back at the wrestling games of the NES. Now, I'm not going to go through every single wrestling game on the NES because, frankly, I don't have that much time to be playing them, but I did choose four wrestling games. And with the release of WWE 2K25 on the horizon, I wanted to go back, especially for our younger viewers out there, to show them a glimpse of wrestling games of the past and how they used to be. So today we're going to be taking a look at four NES wrestling games. Today we're going to be looking at Pro Wrestling, which came out in 1987. Of course, we have my first video game ever that I've ever played, and my first Nintendo game that I've ever played, which was WWF WrestleMania, which came out in 1989. We're also going to be looking at WWF WrestleMania Challenge, which came out in 1990. And then we're also finally going to look at WCW Wrestling for 1990. But we're going to be kicking this off with Pro Wrestling, which came out in 1986 in Japan and 1987 for the US. In the 1980s, professional wrestling was reaching new heights of popularity with stars like Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair and what a rush! The Road Warriors were captivating audiences around the world. Video games were also booming at the time, and it was only a matter of time before the two industries collide in a meaningful way. One of the earliest, most beloved wrestling games of that era was Pro Wrestling for the Nintendo Entertainment System, also known as the NES. Developed by Nintendo and released in 1986, woohoo, birthday year in Japan, and 1987 in North America, Pro Wrestling was a key title in the NES library. And this, as I said, was developed by the Nintendo's R&D division department, which focused on sports titles. The game was designed by Masato Masuda, who later went on to develop a well-known wrestling game, which we will talk about down the line, a well-known franchise, Fire Pro Wrestling, one of the most beloved wrestling game franchises of all time. At the time, wrestling games were still in their early infancy. Most wrestling games were simple arcade-style button masters with little depth, but Pro Wrestling sought to bring a more strategic approach to the genre. Nintendo's developers worked to create a system that was accessible yet rewarding for those who mastered its mechanics. The result was a game that was easy to pick up but required skill to dominate. When the game was released in Japan in 1986, it was met with moderate success. However, the North American launch in 1987 saw the game become one of the most well remembered sports titles on the NES. And with that being said, friends, let's talk a little bit about the gameplay, shall we? At its core, pro wrestling is a one on one wrestling game where players compete in a series of matches with the ultimate goal of winning the VWA Championship. The game features six playable wrestlers, seven if you count the final boss. You had Fire Hayabusa, a martial arts style wrestler based on real life Japanese wrestling legend. Sorry if I botched the name. You have Starman, a masked luchador with high flying moves. You had King Corn Karn, a parody of martial arts wrestlers. You had Giant Panther, a power based wrestler inspired by American wrestlers like Hulk Hogan, brother. The Amazon, you had a heel wrestler with illegal moves like biting and a claw attack, King Slether, a blonde grappler similar to Ric Flair. And then you had the Great Puma, the final boss, the undefeated champion. And the gameplay introduced several key features that made it stand out from its competitors. You had a grappling system. Instead of simple button mashing, pro wrestling used a system where players had to execute moves based on positioning and timing. Signature moves. Each wrestler had a unique attack, like Starman's somersault kick or the Amazon's illegal chop. And then you had outside the ring action. Players could throw their opponents outside the ring and had to return before a 20 count. You had tag team feel without tag teams. While there are no actual tag matches, each wrestler had a rival, creating a sense of in-game storytelling. Winning matches earned the player a shot at the VWA Championship, and after defending the belt multiple times, they will face the final boss, the Great Puma. And as far as the graphics and sound, for an NES game released in the 1980s, well, I should say in the 80s, 86 to be exact, Pro Wrestling had a surprisingly detailed visuals. While the character sprites were simple, they were large, colorful, and easily digestible, which impressive for the time. The crowd animation in the background was basic but effective, with fans clapping and cheering during matches. The game's presentation was boasted by small details like the referee moving around the ring and the instant replay shown after winning matches. While the animation wasn't as fluid as later wrestling games, it was still a step above many other sports games of that era. Sound wise, the game featured catchy, upbeat music that played throughout the matches. The sound effects from punches to body slams were simple but satisfying. The most memorable audio moment of the course was the infamous "A winner is you" victory screen, an example of early NES translations that became legendary in gaming culture. But upon its release, Pro Wrestling was met with positive reviews from both critics and players. Many praised it for its deep mechanics compared to other wrestling games at the time, such as tag team wrestling, and it has some competitive AI, which made it stand out of sports games on the NES. So, my friends, this was a look at pro wrestling, but what will a pro wrestling retrospect playlist be without actually some wrestling? So, let's play a little bit of pro wrestling before we talk about our next three games. All right, here we go. I've chosen the Amazon again, and we are going to be facing the fighter. And the controls are simple. Like, keep in mind, this is just like that old school Nintendo A and B D-pad configuration in the Amazon. Oh, nice cheap shot there. I guess that's what we was talking about here. Going for the cover here and kick out there by the fighter. And it's just, oh, whoa, he just tossed me out the ring. All right. And if when we go through the rest of the three games, you'll see that graphically, aesthetically, this one is the most. I would say it has the best graphics out of the four that we're going to be playing here today. I would say WCW is the second run-up, and whoa, Amazon. Oh, kick to the face there by the Amazon, going to the top here and missing the splash in the fighter now. Oh, and kick there once again by the Amazon. It seems all I can do is just spam that kick because this is my first time playing this game. Going for a cover here on the fighter. Referee kick out there by the fighter. And I'm sorry, I can't help myself when it comes to wrestling games. I just broadcast. It's like the UWO have it. But even with its limited moveset, limited gameplay aesthetics, it still is a fun, enjoyable game that to this day, I honestly believe that this is one of the wrestling games from the NES era that still hold up to this day. It has some really good graphics, as I said, very colorful, very bright. The gameplay for its core, while limited, is still fun and enjoyable. Scoop slam there by the fighter, and the fighter now kick to the face on Amazon, and a no kick out there. Oh, kick to the face once again. Like, you see what I mean by this limited moveset, but a scoop slam by the Amazon, going for the cover here. Referee a little too late here. 2 count and a kick out by the fighter, and another counter here, and a kick and a kick out there by the fighter. But yeah, overall, folks, this one I will say is very enjoyable. If you ever get a chance to check this one out, do so. And wait, can this be it for the Amazon kick out? But we are now going to talk about my first video game ever, my first wrestling game ever. And does it hold up? Well, we'll talk about it right now. Let's talk about WWF WrestleMania. Oh boy. In the late 1980s, professional wrestling was experiencing a mainstream explosion thanks largely to the rise of Hulk Hogan and the WWF sports entertainment formula. Seeing the potential of video games as a new market, Vince McMahon sought to bring WrestleMania to home consoles. Rare, the British studio known for their work on ZX Spectrum and other NES games, was tasked with developing the title. At the time, Rare had already built a strong reputation with games like RC, Pro Aim, just to name a few, but WWF WrestleMania was one of their first licensed properties. Acclaim, fresh off of publishing arcade ports like Double Dragon, took on the publishing duties. They would later on go on to become synonymous with WWF games throughout the 90s, but WrestleMania was the game that started it all. The game was designed as a single player and multiplayer wrestling experience featuring six of the WWF biggest stars at the time: Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Macho Man Randy Savage, the Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase, Bam Bam Bigelow, and of course, Do the Honky Tonk Man. While the roster might have seemed limited for today's standards, it was fairly typical of the NES sports titles at the time, especially considering memory limitations. So, how did the game play? Well, let's talk about it. Unlike later wrestling games that emphasized simulation style grappling, WWF WrestleMania was more of an arcade style brawler. Controls in the move set, wrestlers had a very basic set of moves, and we mean basic, consisting mostly of punches, kicks, and running attacks. There were no grapples, which made it feel more like a fighting game than an actual wrestling game. The health and energy, each wrestler had a unique health bar that slowly drained over time, but you could replenish energy by collecting icons related to your character. For example, Hulk Hogan could recover health by grabbing tiny crosses that occasionally appear on screen. And the matches were won by pinfall only. There was no countout, no submission, or a disqualification system. Hell, there wasn't even a referee on a damn screen. And one of the major flaws that the game's hit detection, which often was very inconsistent. The gameplay was stiff, unresponsive compared to other wrestling games of its time, such as the previous, as we just discussed, Pro Wrestling for the NES. This was my first wrestling game ever and my first video game ever for the NES when we got it. My brother Jason, if he's watching this video, can comment and let you guys know the three games that we had was WWF WrestleMania, Super Mario Brothers, and Duck Hunt. And as me and my brother were big wrestling fans, even at our early age, this was obviously a must go to game for us. And looking back on this game and about to replay it for you guys as well, this does not hold up. It is frustrating. It is just one of the worst wrestling games, if I even want to call it that, ever made. And I truly mean that. And even when it comes to the graphics, for a late 80s NES title, the WWF WrestleMania had a recognizable art style, but was far from impressive. Each wrestler was distinct enough to be identified, but the animations were so stiff and many of the moves looked awkward. Wrestlers also moved at a slow pace, which feels very sluggish. The ring, God, the ring was very simplistic with basic blue canvas and minimum details. There are no crowd animations, and it just feels very, very lifeless compared to pro wrestling with the game we just finished playing. The game featured 8-bit versions of the entrance themes, such as Hulk Hogan's Real American, which truthfully was the standout. That's probably the best thing about this game was the music. And in-game sound effects were limited to just generic punches and grunts. It might have looked decent at the time, but trust me, guys, it doesn't hold up. If I would have to give it any type of positives, I will say that it had actual WWF superstars, and the entrance theme in 8-bit form was good, and they had a two-player mode. I mean, yeah, it's this was probably the worst one that we're going to be talking about right now. But as we do here on Pinfall Rewind, we do play a match for every game that we talk about. Oh God! So here we go, folks. I'm going to play WrestleMania. Okay, here we go. It's time to play WrestleMania. I'm going to be Hogan only because I want you guys to hear the 8-bit soundtrack of the entrance themes. Some of them entrance themes don't really recognizable, but Hogan and Savage definitely themes are recognizable. So let's get to it. God help me. All right, let's go. That's the headbutt. Yeah, there's no grappling. It's literally, and if you notice that the kicks and the punches are straight from Double Dragon from this time period. So I honestly think they took elements of Double Dragon here and just put a ring around it, and it's basically a rock'em sock'em. just beat your opponent until they blink and then pin them. That's all you can technically do. As you hear Savage's theme song is playing in the background, and this is pretty much it. I can't even like act like a broadcaster for this particular game because it's literally just hit detected, just trying to get to him. As you can see, he just keeps running. Like the AI and just it's such a terrible game. It really is, and just so frustrating to play. Could you stay still, Savage? Oh, God, look, kick. Damn it! And there's Hogan's theme, folks. Oh well, damn it. Oh, gosh. Just end this, please. Pin him! Thank you. Alright, that was WrestleMania, folks. Let's get to the next game. WWF WrestleMania Challenge. WWF WrestleMania Challenge was the second game of WWF games on the NES following WWF WrestleMania, which was received poorly. Rare aimed to improve upon its predecessor by refining the mechanics, adding more wrestlers, and expanding the game modes. Despite their efforts, they were still working with the constraints of the NES hardware and LJN's rushed production schedule. So let's talk a little bit about the gameplay. Unlike the previous WWF game on the NES, which had a limited roster, WrestleMania Challenge expanded the playable lineup to 9 wrestlers, including Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Andre the Giant, Macho King Randy Savage, Ravishing Rick Rude, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, Big Boss Man, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and yourself, a created type generic character. The game featured multiple match types this time, like one-on-one matches, the introduction to tag team matches, and 3-on-3 Survivor style elimination matches, or Survivor Series. In other words, it was the first for the WWE games at its time. The combat system and gameplay was a mix of arcade and strategy this time around, though it still had its limitations. Wrestlers could perform basic moves, still punches and kicks, grapples, which were basic strikes rather than full move sets, running attacks, top rope moves, only for some wrestlers, and pin attempts. One of the more innovative aspects was the stamina system. Players couldn't just spam moves without consequence, as wrestlers would slow down when fatigued. However, grappling mechanics felt random due to a lack of precision in the hit detection, and the game relied on button mashing or winning exchanges, which led to very, very repetitive gameplay. As far as the graphics go for an 8-bit game, WrestleMania Challenge had a distinct isometric ring view differing from the side view from its predecessors. This unique perspective allowed for more dynamic movement, but also led to the occasional depth perception issues. The wrestlers had decent sprite designs and recognizable features for NES standards. Ultimate Warrior's tassels, Andre's sheer size, and Macho King's signature look were well represented. However, the animation was still stiff, and the limited color palette made some wrestlers look very generic, especially yourself. That created wrestler that they just inserted just was terrible. The interesting music for each wrestler was absent, but the game did had a catchy chiptune rendition of the classic Real American theme and the Ultimate Warriors theme as well. Upon its release, WrestleMania Challenge received mixed reviews. Critics praised the expanded roster and the attempt to create a more strategic wrestling experience, but criticized the stiff gameplay, awkward grappling system, and lack of depth. And does this game hold up today? Absolutely not. But without further ado, my friends, it's time to play WrestleMania Challenge. All right, here we go. WrestleMania Challenge, and I have chosen the Survivor Series match, which was the first Survivor Series match ever in a video game. And it's a 3-on-3, and you have your partners on the outside of the ring. For some reason, they couldn't stay on the apron, maybe because hardware limitations. And right now, I am the Ultimate Warrior, who's getting his ass handed to him by the Macho King Randy Savage, and Savage is running. And also, just something I've noticed here, if you want to just compare it to the original WrestleMania game, have you noticed how large the ring is compared to other wrestling games? Like, this ring is huge. And I have to give them credit this time. At least, my friends, they have the crowd present here. They have an entranceway for the entrances. So this isometric view actually is a little bit more beneficial. And the Warrior just tossed out Savage on the outside here. But the Warrior is in trouble. And Savage with a scoop slam going for a cover here. This could be it for the Warrior, and it is. So the Warrior has been eliminated from the Survivor Series matchup. In comes Hollywood. Excuse me, not Hollywood. Here comes Hulk Hogan looking pretty damn good, I'll have to say. They did the thing on the Hogan sprites. I mean, he looks damn tan. Like, they really made sure Hogan was damn orange or tan, whatever Hogan is. But the reason why I chose Hogan's obviously because you can hear the music, you can hear it's similar to WrestleMania where they play the entrances themes. Not everybody plays, but you got Hogan, you got Savage, you got Warrior, and gosh, this game is a step up from WrestleMania, but not that much. Not that much. At least now we can body slam and toss them out the ring. And if Savage does not stop running, oh my god. Scoop slam, and then he spams the same thing. So I'm gonna try to spam stuff too. Gosh, this game is so frustrating. Savage again with those strikes on the Hulkster. Scoop slam going for a cover with this fast ass count, and that's it for Hogan. Hogan's eliminated. And now Macho Man has two eliminations to his belt, and now here comes Rick Rude trying to make a difference here as Savage once again keeps running away from ravishing Rick Rude. And look at those knees by Savage. Like I said, folks, I can't help myself when it comes to wrestling games. It's just literally, I've playing wrestling games since this era, and even then I was just always broadcasting. I just can't help myself. But Savage just running away here. Scoop slam. But you've noticed the graphical clippings of Boss Man popping in and out. That's just, like I said, that's just the limitations of the Nintendo hardware at the time. But I am actually going to wrap this up because it looks like I'm going to die soon. Lose soon. And come on, Rick Rude. And the next game will be our final game that we're going to be talking about, which will be WCW. And I would say that's probably the second best looking game here. So let's talk a little bit about WCW for the Nintendo. 1990 World Championship Wrestling, aka WCW, was released for the Nintendo Entertainment System, offering fans an alternative to WWF's video game offerings. And WCW was developed by Nihon Busan, a Japanese company for arcade games under Arcade brand. The game was originally released in Japan as Superstar Pro Wrestling in 1989, featuring a mix of fictional and real wrestlers. When the game was localized for North America, it was rebranded with the WCW license, replacing the roster with actual WCW stars. The game was published by FCI, an arm of Fujisankei Communications, which had an experience bringing Japanese games to Western audiences. At the time of the release, WCW was still establishing itself as a national competitor to WWF. The game served as an early attempt to strengthen WCW's brand in the gaming industry, giving fans a chance to play as their favorite wrestlers from the promotion. Without further ado, let's talk a little bit about the gameplay of WCW World Championship Wrestling. Compared to other wrestling games on the NES, WCW World Championship Wrestling introduced a strategic and technical approach. It featured a roster of 12 WCW wrestlers, including Ric Flair, Sting, Lex Luger, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and the Road Warriors. Each wrestler had their own unique finishing moves, adding depth to the character selection and making each feel distinct. The grappling system required players to time their button presses correctly to execute moves, similar to later wrestling games like Fire Pro Wrestling. Players can perform a variety of moves, including strikes, running attacks, and top rope maneuvers. The game also featured tag team matches, adding a variety to the gameplay. A notable feature was the ability to earn new moves by competing in matches, giving it a slight RPG like progression system. However, the game lacked a deep career mode, meaning replayability was somewhat limited. I mean, come on, it is the NES for that sake. For an NES game, WCW World Championship Wrestling had decent visuals. The wrestlers were distinguishable by their attire and animations were relatively smooth for the time. The ring was well designed, and the health bars at the top of the screen made it easy to track down progression. However, the backgrounds and crowd elements were a minimum, and some wrestler sprites looked stiff during certain animations. Entrance sequences, well, not really there, meaning the game lacked some flair, no pun intended, and no broadcasting, of course. The sound design was standard for the NES with energetic but repetitive chip tone music and basic effects and strikes and grapples. Upon release, WCW World Championship Wrestling received mixed to positive reviews. It was praised for its unique grapple system and which required skill and timing rather than simple button mashing. The inclusion of real WCW wrestlers and their signature moves also made it appealing to fans of the promotion. If we look back at it in 2025 today, WCW World Championship Wrestling is a mixed bag. But I would have to say, out of the four games that we have talked and played matches for today, I will give it in this order. I will go with number one, definitely Pro Wrestling. Number two will be WCW World Championship Wrestling. And then I will go with WrestleMania Challenge. And then I will go with number four, of course, WWF WrestleMania. But, without further ado, my friends, you know what we're about to conclude with a gameplay of WCW World Championship Wrestling. And if you're wondering why I'm saying WCW like that, DX Invasion, Triple H. You're welcome. Let's get into the gameplay. Let's play a little bit of WCW World Championship Wrestling. All right, let's get it started. I am going to be the Stinger, and let's see who computer chooses. This is a 5-minute match, and this is the moves you actually get to choose. Cobra Twist, Backdrop, Boston Crab, Power Driver, Brainbuster, Bull Dodge, and Headbutt, Headlock. So let's get started. And it's very, like, all these NES games play pretty much the same. You're just literally beating them up. I will say that the WCW graphically way better than the WWF counterparts, and we'll actually see WWF games get their ass kicked at least in the 64 era before No Mercy comes out and WWF WrestleMania 2000. They were really getting their ass kicked by WCW with WCW Revenge, which I'll talk about down the line. But right now, it's Sting versus Michael Hayes here. The Freebirds, the fabulous Freebirds, I should say, and Sting with a splash, a rope break. The fact that they included a rope break in this just shows you how more detailed this particular wrestling game was compared to the others. And damn, I'm getting my butt handed to me right now. The controls, just like all these NES wrestling games, were very, very stiff and inverted atomic drop there. Oh no, excuse me, that wasn't atomic drop. My bad. And Hayes again with another backbreaker this time. And I like that system of the actual gauge that you saw there. It just shows you how more devastating the blows are going to be. Really unique mechanic here. And folks, pretty much this is what we're going to be doing with Pinfall Rewind. We'll give you a quick history overview of the game, and then we'll do one match and then head to the next one. So for episode 2, my friends, I think we are going to go a little handheld and go with the Game Boy era, Game Boy and Game Gear eras of wrestling games. So stay tuned for episode 2 of Pinfall Rewind. This is Justin from AttackOfTheGates.com. And if you like what we do here, hopefully we earn your subscription. Please hit the like button, subscribe button, and notification bell to be updated on all here at AttackOfTheGates.com. Thank you for all your support. UWO will return next week. Later days.